Imagine you're walking through the darkened streets of the Halloween haunt, when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, something moves quickly along the ground, very close to your feet, creating a terrifying sound. And before you have time to finish screaming and catch your breath, the sound fades into the distance, and whatever it was is gone. It's a signature scare tactic called sliding, and the Halloween haunt monsters have taken their scares to a whole new level with this technique. The origins of sliding can be traced back to the early days of the haunt, when talent used to literally throw themselves on the ground to achieve the ultimate scare. Sliding techniques and the equipment used have evolved over the years, and now it is truly an event to see.
Let's go.
Sliding is one of the single best scare tactics found at the Halloween haunt. It was developed there many years ago and has been painstakingly perfected to where it is today. What exactly is sliding? It's a technique that was born as the result of one of the monsters deciding to throw themselves on the ground to see what kind of scare it would produce. Well, the result was a success, and the rest is history.
Halloween haunt sliders are probably the greatest scare tactic that's out there. It's very unique, and it's something that's unique to Halloween haunt. You'll see it in other places, but if I'm not mistaken, it was developed at Knott's Halloween haunt. There's no other scare tactic like it.
Obviously, a big part of scaring people, a lot of people have adapted their own versions of different things, but the biggest scare tactic used is sliding at the guests.
Basically what a slider does, it's another form of a scare tactic to generally entertain the guests. What most of the guys do is they hide in dark corners, and wait for the proper guest to come by and just run and slide across the ground on their knees and hopefully get a scare out of them.
They had nothing like sliding in my day. That was one of the new elements that I came back and I thought, wow, that is very cool. We were coming around the stable where that windmill is. There's a ramp there, must be for wheelchair access, but it's a bunch of slats that go up on this long ramp. And just as we came around this corner, this guy comes flying down, hits his knees, and hits each of those slabs all the way down. And I mean, it was so effective. Both of us, oh! And then the second reaction was, cool.
Haunt invented sliding. It's kind of an interesting story on how sliding came about, but they're the ones who invented it. And now you can go to places in Florida that use sliding, and I think that's pretty special.
The early technique of sliding was rather crude and potentially harmful to one's body. Even with that in mind, the monsters continued to throw themselves on the ground to make sure the guests were getting the scares they came for.
When I first started, a lot of people were still doing what you call a body slide. They'd wear volleyball knee pads, and basically what they do, they just throw themselves on the ground and slide about 3 feet. Then there was another guy that came out that started out in Camp Snoopy when it was in the experimental stages. His character's name is Slider, and he actually got sliding to where it is today with the knee pads, the gloves, the special shoes that we use, all that stuff.
Some of the guys I'd seen were doing a similar slide. It was like a baseball slide where they would have their knees with like a volleyball knee pad and thick, this cheesecloth stuff wrapped really thick around it. And then they would just sort of dive on the ground like a belly flop, sort of. Or like a Pete Rose slide, or like a regular baseball slide kind of a thing. So one year I thought, well, I'm gonna try that. And out there, and it was like, just hit the ground and went, just fell on my face, tore the gloves, tore my jeans. I was like, I don't want to play this game. So that was my very first slide, and it was like one for that whole hunt. I tried one and I about broke myself, so I said, this has got to be a better way.
Although sliding was now safer for the monsters to perform, guest safety was still a major priority.
Knowing that what I had worked really well, I didn't want to see other guys do something that they would hurt themselves. And something like that I just like to share. And I really want to make sure everybody else was safe, that the idea that they were using wasn't going to hurt themselves as well as somebody else.
Safety starts before the slide even happens. If you don't have a line of sight, if you don't know what's on the other side of somebody, you don't even slide. That was probably my main concern even before I started sliding, is how do I stop? How do I get out of the way if somebody jumps in front of me? And that all happens, like I said, before the slide, before getting into it.
A lot of that just comes with practice and experience. You got to know your limitations, you know, how far you can go. Now, if you're going at a certain speed, when you can stop, when you can't stop. And that's why we're out here practicing. And that's, you know, I'm being out there for so many years, you just know what you can do and what you can't do.
We now have what we call, it's just like a driver's test. We have a slider certification program, so to speak. We even have little cards for them. And basically is you have to go out and you have to prove yourself. You have to take a test, which is stopping, starting, moving around. And if you fail that test, we're going to give you another chance. If you fail that, then you're going to take a year off. Okay? And since we've started that program, our injury rate and our both to guest, property, and employee have just dropped dramatically.
Sliding on your hands and knees in the dark, wearing a mask or prosthetic, can be difficult to say the least. It takes precision, coordination, and a great deal of practice.
The more you slide in the off season, the easier it's going to be for you when hunt comes around. In the off season, I do a lot of different things. I mean, besides working, I do a lot of swimming. I do weights. I run. In the wintertime, I do a lot of snowboarding, so that helps for the strength on the legs. The biggest thing, though, is probably running to build your endurance.
You need to really be in shape. Your legs, your entire body needs to just be, you know, physically fit. And then you also have to have a quick mind. You know, you have to be able to tell when to stop, how far you need to slide, if a slide's even safe enough to do. You know, it's all those aspects put together. And if you don't have it, you know, you shouldn't even try.
As you get older, and unfortunately some of us are getting older, your body tends to not be able to handle as much as it used to. So I like to start my training earlier in the year. Each year I start going to the gym, just doing the regular weights and treadmill routine. Every month I boost it up a little bit. And another thing that I do is yoga. Yoga's been really good for me the last couple years as far as helping me stretch and getting me more limber. Do a lot more out there on the streets.
The sole purpose of sliding used to be nothing more than a scare tactic. However, it's much more than that today. Some of the sliders have taken their skills to new levels by adding tricks and stunts to their routines.
Sliding as a scare tactic is pretty much in and out. You run up, you see your group, hit the ground, get up, get out. Sliding as a performance, people have developed things like jumps and spins and all this kind of stuff, which you can't put into a crowd, because the minute you're backwards to the crowd, you don't know what's going on behind you. You're going to nail somebody, or you're going to slide into a wall or a post or something. So in the pit in front of the hanging show, we used to do a little sliding demonstration. We would put a bunch of guys in a row and try and jump over them, or we would put, everybody would stand like this and we'd go between their legs, or you know, like doing spins or little flips or whatever. People have come up with all these different ideas, great ones too. The performance part of it, you know your surroundings. You know, I'm this much room, it's all open, there's no guests, there's no walking, so now I'm gonna do something wacky.
Jumping backwards, jumping sideways, jumping while spinning. A lot of it has to do with jumping, trying to balance just on your knees without your feet or your hands. Creating new moves, it's all about being creative to try and make it a sport.
We do monster jumping, monster limbo. We do a thing called the tunnel where all the monsters line up and somebody slides through the tunnel. And we also do just a trick session where everybody does their own thing. There was a big thing for a while where we would see how far we could jump. We'd have all the monsters in the pit lay down side by side, and we'd just see who could jump the most.
The techniques continue to get better, and in the years to come, one can only imagine how sliding will evolve. With more people learning to do it and more sophisticated equipment, the possibilities are endless.
I mean, if you look at when it started, there was other guys doing sort of what I was doing. I mean, they just had real thick pads on their elbows, nothing plastic or hard, and they were just sort of doing a baseball Pete Rose kind of a slide thing, but it was similar. It was still a scare tactic, like diving in and scaring. And then I came along and put all this metal and junk on my body and then sped up the process, so it made it a faster thing. But who knows? I mean, there's guys that every year I see something. Maybe they'll come up with these little hover discs you put on your knees, and you just, actually don't even make noise as you go across. I don't know. There's always something. It'll change.
I'd like to see it become some sort of an extreme sport. It'd be nice if we can figure out some way to get enough speed and put it in a half pipe. That would be real nice.